टेट प्रिपरेशन एंड चाइल्ड डेवलपमेंट पेडागोजी के ऊपर हम कंटिन्यू सेशंस कर रहे हैं और आज के सेशन में हम डिस्कस करने वाले हैं टीचिंग एंड लर्निंग, अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक। एंड अगर आप हम भी देखें कि अभी जैसे टीचिंग एंड लर्निंग का डिस्कशन चल रहा है, ये कहा जाता है या फिर एनसीईआरटी ये कहता है कि लर्निंग शुड कम फर्स्ट एंड देन कम्स teaching. So we can also name it as learning and teaching, but as we are going as per the syllabus of CTET, तो the topic is teaching and learning. तो आज हम डिस्कस करने वाले हैं टीचिंग के बेसिक प्रोसेसेस क्या है and also what are the basic processes of learning. Before we start, let me introduce myself. My name is M. Pavan Kumar. I am a senior research fellow at Regional Institute of Education NCERT Mysuru. Let's go ahead. So what and all are we going to cover in today's session? We are going to cover what is teaching, right? What is teaching and how teaching works. Teaching is a change in behavior. Teaching as a planned series of events that brings desired changes and bridges the gap of learning. We are also going to discuss different maxims of learning. That is how we move from known to unknown. There are different things that are there, from concrete to abstract, simple to complex. So we are going to understand the sequence of rules and how the understanding of this sequence of rules is so going to benefit us teachers, because examiners love this maxims of learning. They always ask questions, and in the previous year question paper also a question was there regarding maxims of learning. We are also going to discuss the 6 principles that are there. The purpose, the correlation, its motivation, reinforcement, stimulation, revision and practice. We are going to discuss that. We are also going to discuss various factors that affect learning. What are the different factors that affect learning and how they have an influence on the entire teaching learning or the learning teaching process. So what speeds up learning? What slows down learning? We are going to discuss all the different factors and errors as steps. How students making errors in classroom is actually a positive step towards learning will be discussed in today's session. Children's errors are significant windows into thinking. They are not failures that are to be punished. So let us go ahead and let us start with a question which was asked in the previous CTET examination which was held in February this year. Which of the following orders of presenting concepts favors effective learning? Is it option A, abstract to concrete, option B, known to unknown, option C, iconic to symbolic, or option D, complex to simple? So, pause and think about which is the correct answer. The question is asking which of the following orders of presentation concept flows effective learning. So the correct answer here is going from known to unknown. We cannot go from an abstract concept to an concrete. No, it's not possible. Iconic to symbolic is also not possible. And it's usually the other way around here. It should always be simple to complex, not complex to simple. So this option is also wrong. And the correct answer is known to unknown. If we discuss about this, old knowledge is the foundation of new knowledge. We call it previous knowledge or the prerequisite knowledge. We use the previous knowledge of the learners. We recall the previous knowledge from the learners and connect it to what they're going to learn in the next class. Right? So, known to unknown. When they are able to make these connections between what they already know to what they're going to learn, the unknown in today's class, then learning becomes much more effective and child feels or child thinks that whatever they are learning is connected to what they already know. So we always build outward from what the child already knows. We do not start the class directly with what the child does not know. The problem of starting the class with what a child does not know is that the child will not be able to understand and make connections and relations. That is why we go from known to unknown. And in CTET examinations, questions can be asked in such a way also, where they'll say the teacher starts a class with an abstract concept and then moves on to a simpler example. So is it appropriate? They'll ask, then they'll give options and also. You have to be very careful that it should always be from what child knows to what child don't know while making the link, making the connection. So, known to unknown. Anchor every idea. Anchor every new idea to something that the child already knows. We were just discussing with the teachers, and a beautiful example was given by one of the teacher who said that for teaching fractions, for teaching the concept of fractions, the students should know what division is, what multiplication is, what subtraction is. This is the basics, this is necessary, and this is something students already know when you start teaching fractions. So you can recall fractions, make them solve some some sums, make them do some problems, and then connect it to fractions. It becomes much more easier. Or in English you can say pronouns taught after nouns, not before nouns. Pronouns are always taught after nouns. Students should know what are nouns first. Only then we can proceed to pronouns. Similarly, we go from concrete to abstract. Right? Real objects and lived experiences are recalled first, and then we go to the abstract rule. If we are talking about a cell, first we talk about an organism, and then we move to cell. Similarly, when we talk about a plant, first we recall a plant. Every child knows a plant. Then we move to the parts of a plant. Similarly, a flower. Every student has seen a flower. They have played with one, they have plucked one, they have explored one. So now moving from a flower to parts of flower makes learning more easy, from concrete to abstract. Then from simple to complex. Simple vocabulary and structure before complex ones, before going towards a paragraph or writing a sentence. The load grows only as the child is ready. You do not put the load directly on the child. Slowly, as the child knows, child starts understanding, the task goes much more ahead, much more forward. So this was maxims. There are a lot more maxims. Let us discuss the different maxims that are there. There are 6 maxims of teaching. What is this maxim? Let us understand that. Maxim is a rule of sequence. So it is a direction in which good teaching technique moves. The direction, for example, we were discussing from known to unknown. So the direction moves from what they already know and connecting it to what they are going to learn, which is the unknown. Each one runs from where the child is towards where the child wants to go, or where you want the child to go as a teacher. Okay, so the first one is known to unknown that we just discussed. Begin from child's existing knowledge. Old knowledge lays the foundation for the new knowledge. Then comes simple to complex. Teach simple ideas and vocabulary before moving to complex structures like sentences. Then concrete to abstract. Real objects are recalled first, then we move out to abstract concepts and definitions. We can talk about human body, and then we can move to different organs. Organ system that makes up the body, the skeletal system that makes up the body. Then particular to general. Give multiple examples first, and then let the general rule emerge from them. For example, we can take dogs. There are different breeds of dogs. There is Indie, there is Pomeranian, there is Golden Retriever, there are a lot of other things, Pit Bull. So many different species of dogs are there. Now you can say that these are different varieties of dog. Together they form one species, that is a dog. Right? So from particular to general, giving multiple examples first and then coming to a general rule. Then from whole to parts. Give the whole picture first, then make them analyze its part. So a sentence before its grammar is the example for this. From psychological to logical, this is one more maxim. The psychological is start from the child's interest. Start from the child's interest and readiness before the subject's own logical order. So make sure that the child is ready first psychologically, and then introduce the lesson or the class that the child is going to undergo. Now let us also look at the 6 principles of teaching learning process. Educationists and psychologists agree on core set of principles. They agree on core set of principles that make teaching effective and learning permanent. Let us look into that. First one is definite purpose. What teaching should follow? Teaching should follow clear aims. Whenever you're planning a teaching process, it should follow a clear aim and objective. That is why we write learning objectives. General to specific. This should be going from general to specific, tied to the subject and the content. Whatever we are trying to teach is, yes, tied to subject and content, and the way we proceed should be general to specific. And you can use any of the maxim. Correlation is very much necessary. What is this correlation? Link new material to the other knowledge and to life. Whatever we are learning in classroom should be linked to real life examples, to how we can apply what we are learning to real life situation and how it can help us, benefit us. So, runs here inductive to deductive, making learning permanent. Then motivation. Motivation is of two types, internal and external. This internal motivation is known as intrinsic, and this external motivation is known as extrinsic. So there is intrinsic motivation and extrinsic. Intrinsic motivation is the child's internal motivation, right? Child's own reward, the motivation that comes within the child. Okay, and then comes external, the extrinsic motivation. In a classroom, a teacher's response, a teacher's reinforcement, a parent's reinforcement, right? Or some kind of reward that the child gets, for which the child works, the student works, is extrinsic. The single biggest driver of learning. When a child is motivated to learn, the child will effectively participate in the teaching learning process, and even the teacher can take a very good class. Then comes reinforcement. Reinforcement is nothing but how you reinforce learners in your class. Positive and negative reinforcement shape and strengthen students' behavior. When we look back at reinforcement, we can look at the classical theories that are given. For example, the B.F. Skinner's theory. If you can remember Skinner's theory of classical conditioning, right? Then operant conditioning. So the reinforcement. So how you give reinforcement shapes their participation, their motivation in the classroom. If they're doing something good, positive reinforcement. If they are done a mistake, no problem. You can try better, right? This is where you did the mistake. You can improve and do better next time. Then stimulation, the state of arousal that makes learner active. Give enough stimulation to the learner that they feel that whatever they are learning is interesting, right? Through environment, interest, aids and technology. There are so many opportunities, there are so many materials that are available now at the disposal of teachers, which are provided through various sources. When we use these materials, when we use these activities, resources in classroom, the learning becomes much more interesting and much more enjoyable and meaningful for learners. Then revision and practice. Practice makes things perfect. It's necessary for learners to revisit. For example, if they're solving a particular sum using a particular formula, they can now practice different types of sums. Or a student has now understood how a concept in a physics or chemistry works. Now they can experiment further, try to see what happens in different scenarios. If we mix lime water with something else, what can happen? Right? So revision and practice. Exercise, consolidate learning and let teacher evaluate or assess how they have understood the topic or achieved the specific learning outcomes that were planned to be achieved. Now let us look at a question. What actually drives learning? Which of the following factors affect learning? Is it motivation of learning, maturation of the learner, teaching strategies, physical and emotional health of the learner? So they have given 4 options, option A, B, C and D. A talks about motivation of the learner, B, maturation of the learner, C, teaching strategies and D, physical and emotional health of learner. The options are A and B are correct, that is motivation and maturation. A, B, C, D, all of the above, motivation, maturation, strategies and the health, physical and emotional health, or only A and C, motivation matters and teaching strategies matter the most, or A, B and C, motivation, maturation and teaching strategies matter the most. Which is the correct answer? Be very careful, look at all the options, all the A, B, C, D given carefully and then select the correct answer. So the correct answer is all, A, B, C and D. The motivation of the learner is very important, because if the learner is not motivated, you cannot teach. How much ever good class you have planned, right? You have planned for very good activities, you have brought in very good learning resources or learning teaching materials to the class will not be effective if the learner is not motivated to learn. So motivation is important, yes. Then coming to maturation of the learner. If the learner is not mature enough to receive the content, if the resources that you are bringing in, if the strategies that you are bringing in is not age appropriate for the learner, you're using a strategy that is applicable for class 9th, but you're bringing it in class 6th. The learner will not be able to follow. So maturation of the learner also is an important factor that affects learning. Then teaching strategies. Of course, teaching strategies is a big factor that affects learning. If you're using innovative strategies, effective strategies to teach, then learning becomes much more joyful, much more informative, and much more meaningful. Then physical and emotional health of learner. Yes, it is also a major factor as all of the above. If the child is physically unwell, they cannot. If they are hungry, they cannot focus on your class, they cannot participate in your class. If they have some mental issues, if they have some mental problems, mental stress like anxiety, then their participation in class is also hindered. So these are the different factors that affect students' participation in the class, or the factors that affect learning in the class. So all four are correct. Learning is shaped by the learner. What is the role of the teacher? The teacher and the setting together. No single factor stands alone. The teacher is also important here, but the main factor is the learner. So what are the learner factors? Their motivation, their mental capacity, their interest and the aptitude. How interested they are to learn this topic, and how interesting the teacher has made the topic. Right? We all have the introduction phase or the engage phase in a class. How motivating, how engaging, and how interesting has the teacher made the topic for the learner? Then, how is their overall health? Because health also affects their attention span, health affects their observation and participation. Then, their attention, readiness, and willpower to learn. These are the different factors. So, if questions are being asked, remember these are the different factors: the motivation, mental capacity, interest, general health, and attention, and readiness and willpower are the ones that affect learners, affect learning among learners. Then what are the teacher factors that affect learning? There are teacher factors also that can affect learning in a classroom. These factors include command over the subject. If the teacher does not have command over the subject, teacher will not be able to effectively teach it, or will be able to give answers to the doubts that arise from students. We have seen that sometimes what teachers do is teachers say, oh, you find out the answer and come. When a doubt is asked and the teacher doesn't know the answer, but it's a wrong technique. A teacher should always agree that they don't know, and they should say, I'll find out and answer you in the next class. This is what we also discuss with the teachers in the sessions. So also the way the teacher communicates. The way the teacher communicates is also very important. If the teacher's tone is very monotonous. Today we are going to learn about parts of flower. Parts of flower include stamen, pistil. So it's not interesting at all. Voice modulation plays a very big role here. How they communicate, how they transact, how they involve learners in the teaching learning process is also very important. Good morning, students. Why do you think this flower looks like this? What is the factor behind this? Let us start the class with a story. So the way the teacher is communicating in the class, the way the teacher is modulating his or her voice, and involving students and making sure that everyone is participating in the class also holds how the class runs and how effective the class is. Then personality and attitude of a teacher. Personality and attitude of a teacher is also a very big factor that influences learning in the classroom. And behavior with learners. How is the behavior of the teacher with learners? Very strict, right? Very rigid, not good relationship between teacher and learners. Teachers don't respect learners. Learners will also eventually not respect the teacher. So this is how these are the different teacher factors that affect learning. Then there are other factors like the environment and the resources also. Even environment and resources have an influence on learning in the classroom. So a conducive classroom is very important. The size, the structure, the suitable learning materials, all of them play an important role. Imagine a classroom where all the four walls are closed. There is no natural light inside. So this closed space can affect learning. or there is too much stimulation. For example, the class is situated right beside the road and the windows are facing towards the road, and students will always be distracted by the passing vehicles or the people moving around. Even that will affect learning, right? So how the classroom is structured, what are the different materials that are available in classroom? If you have just put abstract models everywhere in the classroom, students will be much focused on the models than listening to what you are teaching. So the classroom should have minimal distraction so that the students are participating in the learning process. And also the home environment. The home environment decides how the child's mood is, how the child's health is, right? Emotionally and also physically for the teaching learning process in the school. So 3 types of learning. This is something that we all know, but we all also need to recall. Most classroom learning falls into 3 kinds, right? A richer learning usually weaves them together. When all the 3 are present, a rich learning environment is provided for the learners. The first one is motor learning. Day-to-day physical activity needing muscular coordination, right? Making students sit in one class from morning till afternoon or evening in some schools is becomes very tiring for them. So the teaching learning activities should also include where students move around, participate, do something, create, tinker. It's very necessary. Then verbal learning. The language we use and the ways we communicate is also very important. Voice modulation, something that I was just talking about. Modulating your voice, using gestures, using symbols, signs, sounds and words makes learning much more interesting and also makes learning much more effective. Then conceptual learning, higher order processes. Usually what happens, if you all recall the Bloom's taxonomy, we start with remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and then the highest is create. Usually when teachers plan their instructions to teach, they only limit themselves to the remembering and the understand level. It is very much necessary for us to move to the higher order. That is the apply, analyze, and evaluate and create. It's very important that we also plan our instructions so that we move to the higher order. This makes learning much more meaningful and also generates creative thinking, makes students think, forces them to think creatively in the class. So thinking, reasoning and intelligence through which the child grasps concepts is necessary by moving to the higher order processes. Okay, let us look at the question, how should we read a child's mistake? Let us look into that. Mistakes and error made by students are, option A, mistakes and error made by students should be seen as opportunities to understand the thinking. Option B, are a chance to label children weak or outstanding. Option C, indicate their failure to teach, indicates a failure of teacher and students. Or option D, should be severely dealt with. Which of the correct answer? Which option treats error as an useful information? When a child does a mistake, जब एक बच्चा क्लास में गलती करता है तो इनमें से कौन सा ऑप्शन जो है वो करेक्ट है? So a mistake in a class should be seen as an opportunity to understand their thinking. ना कि उनको लेबल किया जाए, ना कि ये इंडिकेट करता है कि ये टीचर की या स्टूडेंट का फेलियर है, ना ही कि उनको पनिशमेंट दिया जाए जब वो एक मिस्टेक करते हैं. Now, why is it important? Let us understand. Opportunities to understand their thinking. When a child makes a mistake, when a child makes an error, it's an opportunity for us teachers to understand that the errors are significant steps in learning process. When we are able to understand the mistakes, the errors that are made by the learners, we are also able to understand how to help them and where exactly to help them. Knowing where exactly to help them makes teachers' work easier. And questions in CTET examination are also going to emphasize on this specific aspect. So, significant steps. What are the significant steps? An error reveals the child's current thinking. It is a part of learning, not a break from it. So, when a child makes mistake, rather than punishing, try to understand where the child has made the error. What type of error the child has made. This is where the continuous assessment comes. This is where the formative assessment, the assessment during the class comes. Right? Then practice reduces error. When the child is continuously practicing, that is what Thorndike also said. Thorndike said that as a concept is used and practiced, errors fall away. So it's necessary that we practice more. Practice does not mean just repeating it again and again. Practice means whatever we have learned now, applying it to new situations, trying to solve real world problems or new type of problems or much more abstract problems. Error is a stage, not a state. Error is not always constant. It's just a stage. And we can always move forward, move ahead, take a step forward from the stage. So we also have made a lot of errors, lot of mistakes in our everyday life, right? And we learn from our mistakes and we make sure that we do not repeat those mistakes again. Then it is always safe to be wrong. There is no mistake in being wrong or doing mistakes. Children learn poorly in fear. When in fear, effective learning does not take place. They learn poorly. A classroom where mistakes are welcomed, it lets real thinking surface. In a classroom where mistakes are welcome, mistakes are encouraged, saying that अरे गलती करो कोई बात नहीं, जब हम गलती करेंगे तभी तो हम सीखते हैं गलतियों से. और बच्चों को भी लगता है कि ठीक है मैं गलती कर रहा हूँ, बट ठीक है गलती करने पे मुझे समझ में आएगा कि कहाँ गलती कर रहा हूँ और मुझे हेल्प मिलेगा कि मैं कैसे ठीक करूँ इस गलती को. Then effective learning takes place. So, to enable students to make conceptual changes in their thinking, a teacher should. Let us discuss the question of how a child thinks. The question is, to enable students to make conceptual changes in their thinking, a teacher should, option A, make clear explanations and have discussions with students. Option B, offer rewards and reinforcement to children who change their thinking. Option C, discourage independent thinking and ask them to just listen. Yeah, option D, explain only in lecture mode. So conceptual change is a thinking process. Which option among the given respects that? So the correct answer is option A. Make clear expectations and have discussions with students. So clear expectations but discussions is very much necessary. Genuine conceptual change comes through reasoning. Remember, genuine conceptual change, if you want to understood that the students have understood the concept and there is a conceptual change, it comes through reasoning and dialogue. So never through rewards and passive learning. When rewards are given, it does not effectively encourage them. It happens through explanations and discussions. Explanation not only by the teacher, explanations by the students and the discussions that come forward by the students. So discussion drives change. So exposing learners to differing perspectives and taking them through is how stubborn misconceptions shift. When a child is able to hear different perspectives on the similar topic, the child also starts thinking, oh, it could have been thought in that way also. मैंने तो ऐसे कभी सोचा नहीं था, ऐसा भी हो सकता है. So when multiple perspectives are given, the students start understanding, they are exposed to different perspectives and they clear their misconceptions in such a way. Rewards don't rewire. जब हम reward देते हैं तो उनका बस behavioral change होता है. They are not understanding it. So when you are giving a reward, it's a behavioral change. Reward will not rewire how their thinking is affected or influenced. So you cannot reward a child into a new concept. You can never reward a child into a new concept. You always have to make them discuss it. Then beyond the lecture, pure lecture leaves prior concepts untouched. When you just go use a lecture method in classroom where teacher stands in front of the students and delivers a lecture, then effective understanding of concepts does not take place. The learner must actively reconstruct the idea, and what the teacher has to do here, teacher has to support required materials, create the necessary environment and facilitate or support or guide students wherever they need the help. So when we look at the two ways to read a child's error, the one that is wrong, the rejected, and the one that is the constructivist view, that is the rewarded. An error is a failure to be corrected away, which is a wrong thinking. An error is an information about current thinking. Mistakes label children weak or careless. You should never label children. Mistakes are normal and they are a significant step towards learning. Errors are struck out, not examined. No, you should always not cut the answer. For example, when we teachers, we assess the answers of students. We see that a student has made an error in the answer sheet. What we do, we circle it. We never write the correct answer. How many of you do this? There might be teachers who do this also, and it is something that every teacher should do. I understand that the load of correcting answer sheets is something that is very pressurizing for you. But just understand how you can mark an answer correct, but write solve the correct answer for the child there and tell that you should have done it this way. Encourages the child and helps the child to understand where the mistake has been made. So errors are explored to understand reasoning. Fear and strict discipline prevent mistakes. When the child is afraid in the class, fearful of the teacher, then the child will not participate effectively. It might prevent mistake, but also effective learning will not take place. A safe classroom lets real thinking surface. Then the right answer is the one fixed way is the goal. No, there is no, the right answer in one fixed way is not always encouraged. Answering in one's own words is encouraged. There are many teachers who want the answer to be exact definition of what is given in textbook. That will not make you understand if the child has understood the concept or not. When the student is able to answer in their own words, then you can ensure that learning has taken place. So if we conclude, the order that favors learning is from known to unknown. Reinforcement theory was given by B.F. Skinner. Then practice reduces error. That was discussed by E.L. Thorndike. Then children's error are part of learning. They are not mistakes that should be punished. Then strategy for ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is visual aids and hands-on tasks. Then variability and learning styles are valued as human diversity. You should always value the diversity that is there in class. You should not ever discourage the diversity, and as a teacher you should always plan different activities based on the needs and requirements of the learners in the classroom. Then I didn't study enough. It is internal attribution, intrinsic motivation. This conceptual change needs discussion, it does not need lecture. When you are lecturing, conceptual change cannot be emphasized. So I hope you have understood and grasped the concepts that are related to learning and teaching. I have just rephrased teaching and learning and given in syllabus. Thank you, and we'll meet in the next session.